Everyone, this is Ian with Family Time Genealogy with Ian, where I share a little bit about my family history and genealogy and encourage you to do your own investigations into your own family and create that story and that narrative for your family. For the first two videos, we've been focusing on my father's paternal side. This video, we're going to be focusing on my mother's maternal line. Now, my mother is from Watlington County in Caswell County, and her maternal line has predominantly lived in Caswell County, North Carolina, to this day, and they are the Watlington family. So the Watlington family, the Watlington last name is a very prominent last name throughout North Carolina, and especially throughout the Piedmont region and in Caswell County. So there's the European Watlington family, or the white Watlington family, and then there's the Black or African American Watlington family, of which one branch my mother's maternal line is from. So what instigated or inspired me to start investigating my mother's maternal heritage is my great-grandmother. I have a great-grandmother who is still alive and blessed to be still here on that side. And she showed me a picture of her father. Her father was a Harry Griffin Watlington, a World War I veteran, as well as a farmer and a person who owned his own farm in Caswell County, North Carolina. And that farm was adjacent to the white Watlington family former plantation and farm at the time that he lived. My great-grandfather, Harry Griffin, was born in 1895 and lived until the 1970s. Most of his life was in Caswell County, except for the short period of time that he was in Europe before World War I. He had all girls. One of them was my great-grandmother. Harry Griffin was the son of an Armstead Watlington, who was the son of a Archibald Watlington, who, it's my theory again, was the son of Armstead Watlington, who was born in the 1760s, who owned or at least operated and ran the European Watlington plantation at the time Archibald was born. Now, Archibald was born in 1815 in Caswell County, and he's listed as one of the slaves owned by Armstead Watlington. Archibald in the 1860, and 1870, and 1880 censuses was listed as a mulatto. His father was listed as an Armstead, and the only Armstead I could find from the records was I found no African American Armsteads, but was this Armstead who lived at the same time, owned the Armstead plantation at the time that Archibald, who is the earliest recorded record on my earliest recorded person via the historical record on my mother's side. So this young Archibald, born in 1815, was on Armstead Watlington's plantation, the European Watlington at the time, whose father was listed as an Armstead. So we have Archibald, who is listed as a mulatto, whose father is listed as an Armstead, born on Armstead Watlington's plantation in Caswell County. So that is the theory or the connection between that family. And a little bit more interesting is if you talk with my great-grandmother, she would say we are related to the white Watlingtons. And actually her current house that she lives in is next to the Watlington family of Caswell County, the white Watlington family plantation and farmstead. And for years, my great-grandmother kind of helped raise some of the Watlington children of the white or European Watlingtons. And so when I saw this picture of my great-grandfather, Harry Griffin, and heard the descriptions of him being a brown-skinned gentleman with, a kind of light eyes, strong gentleman, a gentleman who really passed on to his daughters the idea of hard work and the idea of resilience, I was inspired and intrigued by his story. So as I started researching, I saw he was the son of an Armstead Watlington, who was the son of an Archibald Watlington. And if you look at Armstead, the African American Armstead, my great-grandfather's father, he also was a farm laborer, but he owned his own land, even though part of the time he rented. And he also helped work the European Watlington family plantation and home. So you can kind of see that where there, and it's not unique to my family, but you can read and also look at a lot of videos, even here on YouTube, about families where there was this connection between the enslaved African American family members and the white plantation owner or planter class family members. There's this connection to remaining close to the European or the white family and working closely with them even after the end of slavery in the 1860s. So Armstead lived and worked on the Watlington plantation while he also owned and rented his own land. And so he was the father of my great-grandfather, Harry Griffin. And now Armstead's father was this Archibald Watlington, who was born in slavery. Armstead, again, was also born in slavery, but later on in the 1840s and 50s. But Archibald was born in slavery, and his father is listed as an Armstead Watlington. Now, I don't know to the extent of the relationship between the white European Armstead Watlington who owned the Watlington plantation at the time that Archibald was alive, whether he openly acknowledged Archibald as his son or whether there was more of a tacit acknowledgement. But it's clear from the historical record that Archibald knew or had some reason to believe that Armstead Watlington, who owned the European or African American or white American Watlington plantation, was his father. And so he lived next to him. He was born on his plantation. And, his father is listed as Armstead Watlington. And Archibald himself identified as mulatto. And this is interesting because I did an ancestry DNA test in 2016 when I was in college. It was one of the first things I actually wanted to do when I got to college. And from my maternal line, I have about 15% or 7 to 15% Scottish ancestry, which is interesting. I don't know if the European or white Watlington family of Caswell County has Scottish ancestry, but that was interesting. That was an interesting find to have that from her and to have such a high percentage of that. And so what's interesting is the family oral history of the African American Watlington family, coming from my great grandmother and even some of her children, my aunts and uncles, and even my mother, all have this story that we are related. We've lived in close proximity to them. My great grandmother, who is the oldest Watlington that we know, has worked, has raised the Watlington children, and her great grandfather and her grandfather, her great grandfather, were very close to the European Watlington family, and her great-grandfather's father is listed in Armstead Watlington, and the owner of the Watlington plantation at the time of her great-grandfather Archibald's life and birth was in Armstead Watlington. And so all of this kind of inspired me and kind of create this not only this narrative, but this story that we have a lot more in common than what separates us. And we as African Americans in this country, specifically those who are the descendants of West Africans in this country, do have noticeable and traceable heritage and connection to those who owned our ancestors and to Europe. That's not to say that we should identify in any way as European or that we should applaud or be happy that we have some European ancestry, but it's to tell a historical fact that African Americans in this country and the white Americans in this country have a longer history and a lot more connectivity, genealogy, and through DNA than a lot of people like to acknowledge. And that because we have so much more in common than what separates us, divisions and laws that try to separate us and movements that try to separate us should be frowned upon. And we should all be wanting everyone to have access to opportunities and things that can make the playing field equitable for everyone and encourage greater historical dialogue and make a better future for those who come later. And so this is the first video of my maternal line, but I wanted to share this video so you have this. And again, my purpose in making these videos is to encourage you to investigate your family history, talk to your grandparents, talk to your great aunts and great uncles, if you can record them. I'm going to try to share some recordings of my family, of course, with their consent, and get their story. It's not about getting into their business, but it's about sharing their story. Like, what was it growing up in the South in Caswell County, through Jim Crow? What was it like growing up during the civil rights movement or even in the 70s and 80s? And what was your memory of your father? What was your memory of your grandfather, your grandmother, your mother? To get those stories and to pass those stories down. Because when we're informed about history, when we are thoroughly informed about the past, we can make better decisions for the future. So that's the end of this video, highlighting my maternal family, my mother's line, her maternal line, the Watlington family of Caswell County. More to come on that family and on further videos about my family history. Thank you for tuning in, and another video will be coming soon.